Hello, and welcome to a video where I answer your questions. In this video, I'm going to be answering Cockatoodude's question, which if I were to summarize into one sentence, it is, what is your design process? If you have your own question that you want to ask me and you want your own video of it, please comment down below and let me know what your questions are. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get into the question. I guess one thing that left me curious after the video is how you go from the high level, almost project goal-like structure of a chapter outline to figuring out the sequence of events in a chapter. And then even further beyond that, the minute details about character actions, historical world events influencing the current situation, motives, feelings, how the events and the character's internal thoughts weave into a broader meaning or in-universe events. Loaded question. I'm sure that some of this just comes from feeling. If you read enough and write enough and probably study enough writing with rigor, I'm sure this bridge will eventually form itself in your head. But I was simply curious if you had any kind of process for it that was maybe more concrete. The reason I ask is because there is a very similar concept in engineering. Let's say you want to design a satellite. You have to go from my team wants to design a satellite to an actual satellite with materials, specifications, structural analysis, a bill of materials, a handbook for operations, and a very precise tolerance specifications. One of the most fundamental things I think I learned in school was what that process is, because in engineering, there is an exact process for this. It's called the design process. Shocker, I know. And it is following this design process that is usually what separates successful engineering projects from hodgepodge, failed contraptions, because it allows you to manage the ever-increasing scope of possibility as you start to bring something from a vague idea to a real-world object. When I learned this process, I kind of figured that the overall idea behind it was broad enough that it could likely be applied to creating anything if viewed through the appropriate framework for the thing it is being adapted to. And I also figured that people in all sorts of creative professions might have their own subconscious versions of the design process, authors of novels being especially high on the list in my head. So what the heck, I might as well ask if you have a version of this, and if so, then what it looks like. Maybe it could make for a decent video topic. Cool. So this is actually my second time recording it. First time my mic was picking up two things at once, and so it sounded very, very horrible. I'll show it right here. Authors of novels being especially high on the list. Yeah, this is my second time. And also, let's switch to the other camera. Also, since recording this last time, I've actually been thinking about this question a lot. And what exactly is my design process? I originally said that the big thing for writing the story is understanding the purpose behind everything that I do within the story itself. Not necessarily me clicking and clacking on the keyboard. I mean, like, what is the purpose behind Felicur deciding to save a child or stay true to the Crusaders' way and killing that child. This is the first big decision in the book. It's in like the 4th chapter, but that is like that pivotal moment, the point of no return, if you want to call it that. But as far as like a design process, it's very hard for me to give you a concrete answer. I can give you a more concrete design process for making something like a short film, which is just, acquire a script, fill out the crew, film it. Obviously, this is very vague, but like film it, and then you enter post-production with different supervisors, you finish the project, and then you release it, distribution. But when it comes to writing a book, this is my first book, so it has been kind of everywhere. I spent the pretty much the first year planning things out. I knew I wanted this to be a big multi-book project with the plan of eventually turning it into comics and animation and audiobooks and all of that stuff. Like, this is my Star Wars, essentially. This is my Harry Potter. Because I've done a number of projects in the past, but I really wanted this one to be giant in comparison and for it to really say something, because I have more of a background in like comedy shorts, which the whole goal was to make people laugh and maybe teach something small. But like this one, I really wanted to challenge myself to create something that had moral value and made you question the way you live, and hopefully provide people with more empathy and also give them a cool adventure to ride along with some fun characters. So design process, it's kind of following the flow. And what I mean by that is, like, this book originally started with me being interested in certain conspiracy theories in the world and connecting them in my own head of like, how would this make sense in our real world? Like, how could these not all conspiracy theories, but there's a number of them I'll go into in another video, but like there's a number of conspiracy theories that I tried to connect in my head to basically legitimize them, and I don't know, I just thought it was fun. Then I had this idea of having Martian bounty hunters. And so with that idea, Martian bounty hunters, how do we enter a world where Martian bounty hunters are a thing? So now it's kind of like I have an idea for one specific variable within the story that I want to include. How does this timeline stretch end up at a point where we have Martian bounty hunters? So now I'm jumping back in time. How did we get here? Because this is also a story that I want to be our potential future, like humankind on Earth today's possible future in 300 years. So how do we get from now to then? What happens everything in between? I wanted there to be robots because I wanted there to be a commentary on AI and robots, and I was inspired by some of the things that happened in Overwatch with Zenyatta and other robot characters in that universe. I thought that the lore was pretty cool there, so I wanted to have a little touching point with that. Okay, so how do we have robots in this world as well? Okay, what did the robots do in the past? Like, once again, filling out that that timeline from like the end point and finding out how the beginning gets to that end point. And I feel like a lot of writing this book has been that. It's kind of been this, I have something I want to include. Then I ask myself, what does it add to the story? How can I include it? What's the purpose? And like, basically things like that. So now we're starting to get a little bit of world building into our beginning point. Let's say we get all of the background figured out, and now we know pretty much where our story starts. So now I'm trying to figure out who are these characters, who's going to be the best character to follow on this journey of expanding people's empathy and having battles and having all of these conflicting views of how people see the world, and having there be these metaphors that can hopefully inspire people to look at one another with love rather than with fear. And I feel like the best way to do that is by showing both. You have to show the fear, you have to show the love, you have to let people understand like why people think the way they do. So now we have a little bit of understanding of like where the story starts. Time to pick out some characters. I eventually came up with the idea of having there be just one robot, and I have reasons for that, but like, how did it get to that point? One of the reasons I decided to go that route was because I wanted there to be dragons, and then I ended up having there be one dragon, and I wanted, since there was one dragon, why not have one robot? Now we have a parallel. It's basically, I was trying to create sets of parallels in the world, basically mirrors of each other with slightly different outlooks on the world to show conflicting views on the world, because I myself have struggled growing up with conflicting views of the world. I grew up religious. My family's Catholic, but I guess I identify with like agnostic religion. I don't necessarily believe in the Catholic ways anymore. But I do believe that there is this like higher force, and that the universe is a very beautiful thing, and I believe in miracles, and there's just a lot of things that are very difficult to explain, but at the end of the day, we are beings on this planet that really just share a giant server, and it's fucking cool. So for going from the broad chapter outline, I'm going to get to that point of having this broad chapter outline into more specifics of like sentence by sentence, action by action. Within those chapter outlines, it's basically writing the story over and over and over again, and each time it's more specific. For example, I knew I wanted the robot to be this murder robot, and he really struggles with fitting in the world. And he accidentally kills people, and he's learning how to coexist without any sort of information. It's basically like following a newborn who can kill anybody, go into a world and learn that killing is bad, and learn why people act the way they do, and laugh and stuff. So now I have this like image of how I want this character to play out, and I've got these like moments that happen as well. And another character I decided to create was this child soldier, and I wanted the child soldier to be the black sheep of the group. He is a little empathetic towards this alien race. Of course, I wanted aliens. I'm a big fan of Halo and the elites and stuff. So I wanted there to be like an elite-inspired alien species on Mars that has conflict with the humans. And I had to figure out, why are the humans at conflict with these alien species? So then I went back and I figured out how I can accomplish that. And I have this past moment where all that happens. It's kind of like, it's a combination of wanting to add things, being hard on myself for understanding, not hard on myself, but like truly understanding the purpose and the value that that variable brings to the story as a whole, understanding where the characters that I am going to be following through the story start and where I want them to end, how I can get them from point A to point B, whether that's physically moving them from point A to point B, because in one case, one character really wants to go to the city called Labion. That's Felicur, the child soldier. He really needs to get to Labion. I'm not going to explain why, but that's one of the things he wants to do. So that would be a physical movement from A to B. And I, as the author, want him to be pushed to the limit. I want him to go through so much pain and agony, which sounds really awful when I say it like that, but I want him to be pushed to his limit to see how he will act and see if that code that he follows will change, because he won't kill this alien child, but will he kill another human? And how can I push him to the point where he does kill a human? Spoiler, he does end up killing a human. First time is for survival, and I'm not going to elaborate, but you get the picture. And then I wanted someone who was the opposite, someone who had very little empathy for the other species. So for that, I needed an alien. I needed an alien to really hate the humans and basically want to kill them all. How can I get that alien to no longer hate all humans and even start to like some and potentially protect them? So now I'm building up these obstacles in their path. How can I get them from point A to point B on an emotional level? Weaving all of those together, now I've got myself a rough character outline, and I've got this story, multiple stories interweaving and connecting. And now I take these specific moments. I know these scenes are existing. I'm going to include those in the chapter outline, and I'm basically going to write out their story. This is what I would do. For Oganda, the Selthian who hates humans, I wrote out her story. She starts out as this alien leader. She wants this child to die because of X, Y, and Z. Eventually, she's like in that situation where she can, and then she ends up not doing so, and then other forces end up going on her to external forces push on her character, leading her into these other areas. And so now I've got this roadmap of how Oganda's character, what that character experiences. I've got one for Felicur. I've got one for Plank, the robot. Create the character. Now I have to go through and basically, I think about all the events that happen in the whole story and moments that each character might interweave and connect into each other's story. From there, then let's say I write out the entire story. I have everyone's actions in it. I have had the chapter outline, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, what happens in each chapter. My first chapter outline was 26 chapters. My current rough draft is at 78 chapters. No, 68. Sorry, it's going to end up being like 70 chapters. So I was way off. And it ended up being way longer. But the reason it ended up being longer is because every time I wrote out the story, at first it was 2 pages for one character. Then it ended up being 15 pages for all the characters. And then I go through and I write the first chapter. I expand on that. That first chapter is now like 8 pages. Then I write the second chapter. I expand on that. And each time I write these chapters, I keep going. And let's say now I'm on like chapter 10. Now that I've written 1 through 9, I have 1 through 9 in my head, much more vivid, because I've actually put the effort into going moment by moment with these stories, or with the chapters. Now I'm thinking, oh wait, what if I add this to chapter 2, because it will add X, Y, and Z to it. It'll help me expand the world a little bit. It'll help me expand on the characters and where they're currently sitting. It'll help me with some relationships that I can expand a little bit further. What if I add this to chapter 5? Because I've been sitting on it for a couple weeks now. Let me add this, and I write in a little chunk of text in parentheses, and I say, add a moment here where character X does this because of this. Bracket, boom. And maybe I'll actually write it right then, and maybe not. Oftentimes I don't. I just leave that bracket thing at the top of the chapter and I move on. I continue writing where I was. Continue, chapter 20, chapter 30. Oh, wait, what if I add this to chapter 23? Oh, that could work. And then because of that, now I should add something to chapter 5 because I can introduce that character in chapter 23, in chapter 5, to foreshadow it a little bit better. Oh, now that I'm writing chapter 46, you get the picture. It's basically writing the story over and over and over again, each time bigger and bigger. It's like originally starting out with this skeleton of like this really, really skeleton draft, like an outline of the bones. And then you go through and you start actually sketching the skull a little bit. And then you finish the skull and you start sketching the collarbone. And then you're like, wait a second, that skull should have some muscles on it. Or maybe an eyeball. And then you keep going down and you're doing the rib cage. Oh, wait, maybe I should add a little hair to that head. And then you keep going down. Now I'm sketching out like the pelvis. Ooh, maybe I should add a little bit to the chest area. Let's put some muscles there. It's kind of like that. That's how I would describe my design process. To never start writing the first chapter with the hair, and instead start with an outline of the skull. This is my first book. This is my first time ever writing a story this big. I have before written it where I was a planter, or a pantser, I think is what it's called, where you just put the characters in the situation and then you just write it and you see where it goes. You don't necessarily know where it's going to happen. With this one, because I knew it was going to be this big story, I wanted these arcs to be pre-established before I actually wrote the story, so I knew where I was trying to go with things. Even I wasn't too sure what the obstacles were going to be in order to make that character go from point A to point B. I knew that there needed to be obstacles there eventually, and so when I was putting the effort into actually expanding moments, I still had that in my head. Oh, I need to add something here at some point. And so that's, I guess, my design process for writing a book. Thank you for watching. I'm sorry it took so long, Cockatoodude, but I really wanted to make sure I put a lot of effort into answering this question as genuine and honestly as I possibly could. I'm going to take one last look at the comments, see if I got everything. I wanted to address one more thing. You say, I'm sure that some of this comes from feeling. If you read enough and write enough and probably study enough writing with rigor, I'm sure this bridge will eventually form itself in your head. That is slightly true. I have written a lot of stories in the past, but none of them have really been in book format. I did a lot of writing in script format because, like I said, I have a background in filmmaking. So I understand story structures, but I didn't understand prose very well. I didn't even read books very much. I struggled with ADHD when it came to reading, and so I it was very difficult for me to read pages. I was good at paragraphs, but reading pages was very difficult. My mind would wander. I wouldn't know what I just read. I'd have to reread it over and over again. But like last year or so, I started to better manage my ADHD, and I've become better at actually getting through books. It took me a while, but the first book that I had read since high school was Handmaid's Tale, and that took me many, many months. Now I'm reading Project Hail Mary, which has been really nice, and I feel like I've really gotten into the groove of things, and I've really understood how my ADHD works. So I wouldn't say that I studied writing with rigor, but I guess I studied story as a spectator as well as a writer myself. So yeah, I think I answered everything. If I didn't, please leave another comment in this video, and if it's ends up being something video worth, I'll make another video, and if not, I'll just reply to your comment. But yeah, thanks again, Cockatoodude, for asking this question. It was really fun to answer and really fun to think about. I apologize once again for it taking so long to finally get this video done, but I was really focusing on writing for a while, and I was also just like sitting on this question and pondering it, like, what is my design process? And yeah, it's just kind of follow where the ideas are. Suddenly something will come up. Write it down. And if it works, it gets implemented, and if not, go on to the next idea. You can't hold on to it very tightly. You just gotta trust the process, I guess. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one, where I talk about more stuff related to my sci-fi epic Siphon. Bye.